Oh, welcome back. Chandler looked shocked. Welcome back. This is Run It Back on a Wednesday. We're going to bring in Anthony Slater right now from The Athletic. Oh, he's putting chapstick on. Like, Anthony, we are very professional here at Run It Back. We got makeup going on in Chandler's box. Lou, I don't know what he's doing, but you're here on time and ready to go, and we appreciate you for it.
Let's stop talking about my box.
In some hotel room.
I'll never. I know, right? Where are like that is
Dallas.
Serial killer-ish.
Yeah.
Dallas.
Top 5 of a 6-game trip. So I almost forgot I was in Dallas. It's at that point of the road trip.
Any protests or riots outside the hotel? Or you
How's
say
the outside?
Yeah, it seems okay right now. I'll let you know tonight. It's going to be interesting. 8:30 local tip tonight. So I don't know if that even, yeah, I know.
Not
I hate
acceptable.
it, but yeah.
Oh, I hate it. I hate it.
That's West Coast basketball in Texas, right?
That really is, because I'm in Texas right now, and an 8:30 start is a no-go for me. And P.S., does the air feel sad? Because I want to know if the air in Dallas just feels different this time around.
It's actually colder than I thought it was going to be. It was really cold in Milwaukee, and I was like, all right, well, at least I'm going to Dallas, and then it's like 40 degrees. So
no, LUKA took everything with him. It's all gone. Let's talk Warriors before we get to all the rest of it, too, because don't look now. You get Jimmy Butler. 2-0. I don't think it's a coincidence. Is the vibe? How is the vibe around the team since the trade?
Really good. He just does so much of what they didn't do. I mean, particularly like he has 28 free throws in 2 games. They haven't had anybody since Kevin Durant in 2018 who had 13 free throws in consecutive games. He just did it. He's getting to the rim. They haven't done that. He had 4 steals the other night, kind of sneaky, disruptive steals. So they've been glowing about his help side defense. He's come in and really kind of lifted the spirits of the whole organization, which is funny though, because then when you talk to him, he's like, I'm not playing well. I'm not in good enough shape. I don't have lift on my jumper. I'll be a lot better. But then you talk to everybody else, they're like, we just got this great player. They're in such a good mood about him.
Well, he's in honeymoon phase. That's where he's humble and like self-deprecate. We do all this, Jimmy. This is very human.
He's paid,
but here's what I want.
They paid him. That's the big deal. They gave him a 2-year extension coming in, and he can't even be eligible for an extension for a while here. So as he's made the point to me that the issues have always been with management, right? He doesn't really have that many issues historically with teammates.
No, God, I feel I am Jimmy Butler. Can I ask you a question though? Because it went from not going to the Warriors to then they pursue KD. KD's like, no, thank you. Then ends up with Jimmy Butler. So there was a lot of sort of movement, then not movement. What exactly went down?
Yeah, they spent about a week trying to get Kevin Durant in somewhat of a clandestine, secretive way. But by the time that Durant got to the Bay Area on the Friday prior to the deadline, and his business manager, Rich Kleiman, sitting next to Joe Lacob, that's starting to leak to Kevin Durant that the Warriors are after him, and even to the public, right? We start putting reports out that this is, being attempted to happen behind the scenes. And Steph Curry had a conversation with Kevin Durant that weekend prior to the deadline, which according to him, he knew pretty much right away, hey, look, Kevin doesn't really want to come back. I don't really know why we're pursuing this that hard. But, the Warriors front office and ownership, maybe, it was put to me that they were maybe a little bit, they underrated how much Kevin Durant didn't want to come back. So they tried up until about Tuesday before it became clear, it wasn't the right path. And by that point, Jimmy Butler, who's, by the way, his eyes were elsewhere too, right? He wanted Phoenix. He'd come to the realization that wasn't going to happen. So then these two kind of almost had a, marriage of I guess coincidence, or, they were almost second on each other's lists. But now, that they're, like you said, in the honeymoon phase.
That's crazy. So the KD thing was never going to really happen. It's a bit of a bummer. I think we started to get kind of excited about it.
Well, it could have. They could have done it without his wishes, but I think as they came to, realize how much he was like, behind the scenes, like, please don't do this. They were, having 2019 flashbacks in their mind where it was like an unhappy Kevin Durant who didn't want to be there. And in a lot of ways, they went to the finals. They probably would have won it if he doesn't get hurt. They were a great team, but it was a really unhappy season. We don't need to go back and rehash all that. Everybody remembers most of it. But they just decided they didn't want to bring in somebody who didn't necessarily want to be there, especially a person they've already experienced that with. So instead, they pivoted to Butler, who theoretically wanted to be in Phoenix, but you could tell, especially with the money now, he's really happy to be there. And that is a big difference.
Yeah, and I think locking him up, giving him that extension, obviously you're going to get the best version of him, right? At 35 years old, you kind of have to do that. You have to maximize the Steph Curry window, which after the game the other night, he says every possession just doesn't feel as hard with Jimmy on the floor. Like, do you see a different rejuvenated Steph Curry as well, just from bringing in Jimmy?
Yeah, 34 points, 38 points. Hit 8 threes the other night. He's still getting doubled, but as he said, he feels so much more confident when he gets it out of the double team, like something good's going to happen. Steph also called them opposite players, which I thought was like a really interesting way to put it. Basically, Steph's taken 16 threes against Chicago. Jimmy Butler's taken one. Steph is not getting to the line. Jimmy Butler's getting to the line 13 times. They just didn't have anybody, especially with Jonathan Kuminga out, that was pressuring the rim at all. And now, I think Steph feels confident, not only getting it over to Jimmy through the course of the game, but they haven't had to close out a close game yet. That's been such a problem for them this season. As Steve Kerr's already mentioned, he believes, late in these frantic games when sometimes Steph's turning it over, or they blew a 10-point lead to Utah, early on this road trip before Butler got here. The plan now is to give the ball to Jimmy Butler, slow the game down, milk the clock, hopefully he can get to the line, set up the defense. So they just believe not only did they need an infusion of talent and a co-star for Steph Curry, but they kind of got the perfect style of player next to Steph Curry.
What does this mean for Jonathan Kuminga? I feel like him and Jimmy are kind of similar players, like that he's their future cornerstone. They obviously didn't have to give up much. They kept him, they kept Pods, they kept Moody. But if you're Jonathan Kuminga, you kind of just signed this similar player for a lot of money for 2 more years. How do they kind of utilize him still?
Yeah, there's the positive way to look at it and the negative way to look at it. The positive way is there's a belief that this could be like a perfect, I guess, prototype for Kuminga to look at. And I went into the locker room the other day in Chicago, and he's immediately calling me over like, I love this guy. I love to watch how he plays because it's like power driving. It's the stuff that I think Kuminga needs to maximize. Like, look at Jimmy Butler and try to be that type of offensive player. And I think in a way like Jimmy mentoring him could be a good thing. They're trying to say they could do small type lineups where it's, Steph, Moses, Moody, Kuminga, Draymond, and Butler, and you switch a lot. Maybe they've got this new young stretch five, Quentin Post at 4 threes the other night. Maybe you throw him out there. But it's wings in the NBA. You could throw like size, similar type wings on the court together, and they can kind of co-inhabit it. But you mentioned the money. Butler's making $54 million next season, whereas Andrew Wiggins, who they traded out the door, was making $28 million. So it's a lot more crowded on the books. I'm actually writing a story about it right now. I talked to Joe Lacob. He says they're still committed to playing Kuminga long term. They're clearly going to be a big tax team next year. They're going to be close to the second apron if they bring Jonathan Kuminga back. But his max is about $38 million. Maybe there's probably going to be negotiations. You're talking between like high 20s and that $38 million mark. But as long as they're willing to go deep into the tax and near the second apron, you theoretically could fit Kuminga in. But I think we will find out the rest of the season if it is the right type of on-court fit and if they can win with this type of core. And if so, I think they'll pay him. But if not, maybe they do shake up the roster more this summer.
And Anthony, you wrote about this with the Warriors win over the Bucks that, Jimmy was gassed, getting back on the floor, trying to get his legs back up under him. How do the Warriors manage him and Steph Curry moving forward? Because all of these games are going to matter, and they're going to need those guys on the floor. How are they going to manage them?
Yeah, it's a good question. Jimmy said Jimmy wants to play right now, right? It's part of the reason he's gassed. He said he was in San Diego a little bit and was able to get some 5-on-5 runs, but he basically didn't play basketball for a month. But he wants to play himself into shape, so he wants to be on the court. For example, they got a back-to-back right now: Dallas tonight, Houston tomorrow night. I expect him to play in both games. He thinks his prediction was coming out of the All-Star break. He'll kind of feel a little bit more 100%. But I think even if he played the rest of the games this season, he's only going to end up playing 40-something games. So I think he's okay. As far as Steph goes, early in the season, they wouldn't let him play back-to-backs because knee tendonitis. Right now, they say the knees aren't barking as much, number one. But number two, they're desperate right now. They are targeting the 6th seed, which means they need to leap about 3 or 4 teams here, including the Clippers and Timberwolves, which means they need every win. Tonight is a huge game in the standings. If they win tonight, they're ahead of the Mavericks. So Steph's going to play, and again, I think Jimmy Jimmy's presence limits his burden, which matters. Every minute is still a lot on his body. He's going to turn 37 next month, but with Jimmy around, theoretically, a 34 minutes isn't as hard as it was a couple weeks ago. So it's a good question, but I think they're just going to keep playing these guys because they got to win games.
So
Absolutely.
jumbled.
And we just spoke about Jonathan Kuminga, but on the basketball side of it, in that same game against the Bucks, Warriors went to a small ball lineup with Draymond at the 5. How does this impact Jonathan Kuminga when he comes back into this lineup, especially with them playing some small ball?
Yeah, I think Jonathan Kuminga has been at his best historically when he's been the 4, which means Draymond either has to not be on the floor or be the 5. You do wonder, like with Draymond, with Kuminga, with Butler on the floor, that's 3 kind of non-shooters. You're probably going to need Jimmy Butler to take a few more threes. He's only taken 3 so far in 2 games. Kuminga, he's the defenses are probably going to leave Jonathan Kuminga, but he's gotten a lot better as a catch and shoot 3-point shooter. He can hit mid 30%, so he's probably going to have to hit a lot of threes, down the stretch. But I think the 2 lineups that I kind of mentioned that I think they're most intrigued with are those small ball Draymond Green at the 5 type units where they just feel like they can maybe turn teams over a lot and get out and run. And historically, that has been the Warriors at their best. And then I know he's not a name that many people know, but this kid Quentin Post, he's hitting step back threes. The other night he hit a 28-footer. He's a 7-footer. They haven't had a stretch 5 in a long time. And I think if he could keep shooting the 3 well and survive defensively, then I think that they can kind of create lineups that make a lot more sense, because if your center can shoot threes, you can play these downhill wings together.
We have not talked to you, Anthony, since all the crazy trade stuff, right? And obviously the Luka one was mind blowing. It reached over all facets. Even if you're not an NBA fan, you had an opinion on it. So for you, did it feel like it was just a shift in what's possible as far as trades go in this league?
Yeah, and it felt like, look, the Warriors were going to be aggressive regardless. And by the time that Luka was traded, they were already like behind the scenes trying to nudge the Suns on Durant. So I think they would have been aggressive anyways, but it did feel like it just upped the temperature of everybody. Like, you got to get something done, especially the Lakers, right? It felt like they were in this parallel universe with the Lakers where they had these, legendary players that were playing out their final days on these teams that just didn't have enough around them to win. And then suddenly LeBron has Luka. It was like, you better get Steph somebody. So again, I mean, maybe that's the world I'm operating in because I'm mostly around the Warriors, but it did feel like it upped the desperation level to make a big splash. And maybe Jimmy Butler's on this team regardless of if Luka Doncic is still in Dallas or not. But it did feel like it opened up the world to what maybe, more is possible.
Anything feels possible at this point. Were you shocked, by the way? Because we've talked to a few people. Obviously, we were all shocked. What were you?
Yeah, no. Trust me, if I knew Luka Doncic was being shopped, you probably would have reported it. I would have had it out to y'all.
It's the most breaking news in history.
How about if Wemby got traded? Would that one shock you?
I would riot. I'd be honest with you. I would riot.
You know what did you, Anthony? Every player is now on notice. Obviously, the Wembys, the Jokic are less on notice, but come trade deadline, I think everyone's thinking, okay, anything is possible now moving forward after this Luka trade.
Except
I remember
for
talking to Draymond in the aftermath, and his name was being like quietly kind of floated out a little bit during those Durant talks, and you could tell he was a little bit more, maybe on edge as the deadline was nearing. Partly because of what happened with Luka.
Man, everyone got a humbled moment in that one. Anthony Slater, we appreciate you. Enjoy Dallas. Can't wait to hear the vibe reports for the game for you tonight.
I'm just gonna be walking around the stands